let's get some CRs done. Okay, we're gonna get right into it. First one is submitted by Dewey, and our facilitator is Grace. Grace, are you on the call?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
So this one's pretty easy. I mean, the request is pretty easy, isn't that they're saying that to be in harmony with the ISPSC, they want to add number 7 to for that. I mean, for that 1.2.3.5.3. So then it says for diving boards and tall platforms, density factor equals 300 feet square per bather. So that is the request.
Okay. Any, let me see, did we send, it
No,
doesn't
it
look
was
like
not
we had a
sent.
chance to send it to the TSCs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this seems pretty straightforward. Any comments from anyone? All right. Hearing no comments, we'll go ahead and vote. Any nays? All right. This is supported. Go ahead and close that one out. We're on a roll.
One vote closer to snickerdoodles.
There you go. Next one is from John Kelly. This is 486212. And Heather is the facilitator on this. Heather, you want to give us a quick rundown?
Sure. Let me, which one did you say this one was?
486212.
Okay, the chain link. Okay. Okay, so this one, it seems kind of straightforward. Okay, yeah. I was making sure you do have the supporting documents that was submitted there. Basically, all it's saying, they're wanting to change the requirement or the wording for the mesh size so that it will say chain link fencing constructed of 1 1/4 inches, the maximum opening of 1 3/4 inch mesh shall be permitted, because apparently there's some confusion in the way it's currently worded. And I do not think this one has not been sent to the TSC, but I think it's pretty much straightforward. And then they supplied submitting documents there that just kind of back up from, I guess that's a Common Manufacturers Institute of chain link. But they're just wanting to say that the 1 1/4 inch should be the correct wordage, because when you measure that horizontally, then that is the 1 3/4 inch opening.
I see. And it looks like it would harmonize with the ICC and ISPSC. Okay. Great. Any other comments? So then the understanding is that this doesn't change the opening that we currently have. It just is more specifies.
Yeah, because the way I read it, apparently somewhere they're allowing 1 3/4 inch, which makes that horizontal opening larger than the 1 3/4 inch, so it makes it more of a foothold.
Okay. Any comments? All right, hearing no comments, go ahead and vote. Any nays? Hearing no nays, this one is supported as well. All right. All right, next one is 48631. This is by forgive me if I mispronounce it, June. I'm not going to try your last name. I don't want to butcher it, so I apologize. Heather, this is yours again. This is about gates and doors, self-closing and self-latching from any reasonable open position. You want to give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, the current language just simply says that gates and doors self-closing and self-latching from any reasonable open position. And they're just saying that it's currently unreasonable if it's enforced as it's stated. And they want the wording changing to all primary public access gates or doors serving as part of an aquatic facility enclosure or required aquatic venue enclosure shall be self-closing and self-latching when opened to any position 12 inches or greater. The reasoning behind it is basically some of the inspectors are literally interpreting that as any open position, it must self-close and self-latch, even from an ajar position. And that they're saying that if an ajar position, it doesn't self-close, self-latch, they're tightening up the springs too much. So it's making the door actually slam and bounce back open. And then in natatoriums where you've got the pressure difference, it's not allowing it from an ajar position to self-close, self-latch. There's really no scientific reason for the 12 inches. They thought 1 to 6 was not quite enough. And they thought 6 to 12 was good. So just say at 12 inches that any door or gate open from 12 inches or greater must be self-closing, self-latching.
When I first
And
read
this one,
that,
I do not think this was not sent to TSC either.
when I first read that, I read the new part. I said, well, what if the door's opened for some reason 10 inches and it doesn't self-latch? For some reason, a door can be designed so it only self-latches if it's 12 inches or greater. But if you open it just a little, then it doesn't self-latch, self-close.
Right.
So it kind of leaves the opportunity for some creativity there for a door to be left open just 10 inches.
Right.
That sounds to me like a little kid can get his hand wrapped around the door and open it up all the way to get in.
And I'll just say, being from the regulatory side in North Carolina, our rule simply says that all doors and gates must be self-closing and self-latching, period. That's our regulatory standard here in North Carolina. But I agree. I mean, even if it's ajar, a small child can get in, a very small opening. They don't need to open the gate as far as an adult needs to open the gate. And then is it left open for a smaller child to get in? That's kind of the question.
Isn't the gate, like the slats have to be less than 4 inches? So isn't 4 inches more reasonable? And I agree, Joe, maybe any ajar, any opening, somebody can get in there without it's unauthorized access. And that's scary for little kiddos.
Right.
Right. But from a practical standpoint, if someone just unlatches it and pushes it out a half an inch, it's not practical to expect that to come back. And when I've gone through this with inspectors in the past, I usually suggest that they open it 6 inches, halfway, and all the way.
Yeah, I mean, as a regulator, we're not trying to like, oh, I'm gonna get you by just opening it slightly and let's see if
Right.
it closes, like, does it have enough torque? I'm gonna be reasonable and open it, enough for it to self-close, have that, torque for it. So I
Did-
don't see why we have to add this in a way.
What if someone puts a 2x4 down on the ground and props it open just 3.5 inches?
Mhm.
It'd be in compliance.
Right.
It almost seems like the specificity either direction is the issue here, that what prompted this CR is the fact that it doesn't stop at self-closing and self-latching, but adds the qualifier from any open position, which allows people to interpret that as a jar. So it seems like what is crossed out here possibly should be crossed out, but it also seems like the addition of when open to any position 12 inches or greater adds too much specificity the other direction. And we might be able to solve this just by accepting the strike through, but not the addition.
I like that idea.
Right, where it just says that they shall be self-closing and self-latching, period.
Exactly, just like your rule.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think we
agree.
have to send it back though. I don't
I
think
agree.
I wouldn't agree with that because I've been to too many facilities that are they're self-closing, self-latching gates, but if it's not fully swung open, it doesn't have the spring strength to latch back or hasn't been appropriately maintained, or there's a myriad of reasons why it doesn't swing back. So I actually like the from any open position, and I think, Grace, from your point, it kind of leaves it up to the inspector to be a decent inspector and decent person, and not and not be ridiculous about it. But I think to Joe's comment, if somebody props it just a couple of inches open and then takes that prop out, you want it to latch. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the health inspector opening it a couple of inches and expecting it to close.
Yeah, my concern would be the 12 inches, right? So guardrails and things like that, we have a 4-inch opening requirement, right? So that's the predetermined size for fit through, right? So the 12 concerns me. I would be comfortable with 4, so it's more consistent with other impenetrable objects, I suppose.
I think I'd be more comfortable with it if there was some more language around not propping, doors open, things like that.
But I think it's still the self-closing, self-latching. If somebody goes and tries to circumvent that, that's a whole separate issue. I'm not sure that even fits in this particular location, right? So this is really addressing the mechanism, right? That it has to be self-closing and self-latching, and then putting that specificity around from what size opening so that people can't breach that enclosure. I think the other thing is really just a willful and wanton violation of ethics.
Yeah. I think I would not support this one. That's any other comments? All right. Let's go ahead and vote. I at this point, I'm going to hesitate unless anyone really feels strongly about sending it back to the submitter. I would hesitate to go that route at this point with just what we have to do and the timeline we have to do it in. So let's hear any yays, anyone in support? All right.
Silence.
So this one is not supported. All right. Move on to the next one. This one is 486, and Heather, you're this one as well.
Hey, y'all are just knocking me out early today.
Yeah.
Okay, and this one, it also, I think we can probably knock out 5.8.6 as well, because they're pretty much the same thing. It's just two different sections.
Okay.
But it's the same issue. So basically, I was not involved with the 4th edition changes, but apparently in the 4th edition, there was some terminology between enclosure and barrier that was supposed to be changed, and it was not. So that's what they're wanting, like section 4.8.6. It just says barriers now. They're wanting to change it to enclosures and barriers. And the same thing with 5.8.6 is also to change that section to enclosures and barriers. And like I said, this apparently was something that was supposed to have been done 4th edition. That clarification was supposed to have been done then and was not. And they're just asking for the clarification this time around for both of those sections.
So they just want to change the title of the section?
Yeah, because it says in the 4th edition clarified difference between enclosure and barrier was changed to enclosure. And in 4.8.6, the major emphasis is now on enclosures with much less emphasis on barriers. And therefore that should be changed to enclosures and barriers to properly reflect the changes. And then it's basically just the opposite of that in the 5.8.6.
So they want to change barrier and enclosures to enclosures and barriers.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's specific.
Yeah. And like I said, I was not involved in the 4th edition, so I don't know exactly what was the changes there and the clarifying the difference between enclosures and barriers, but that's what they're asking for now is the both of those. The proposed change to 4.86 and 5.86 is now to be enclosures and barriers.
Can we toss this one to the CDC as editorial?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, let's just vote in favor of this so we don't have to see it again.
Yeah, it doesn't really change anything. If it makes somebody happy, and I guess if it's more correct grammatically.
Yep.
I'm in favor.
And for things like this, Sarah asked me, Sarah, I hope I can put you on the spot. Sarah asked me yesterday or the day before, my days are running together. So it's a good opportunity to remind everybody, our vote in support or to not support a CR does not mean that it does not get voted on by the general membership. All it does is just says that we reviewed it and that we supported or did not support it, and then the general membership still gets to vote on everything. So whether we support or don't support, this one, the membership's still going to vote on it. So like this, because it's just kind of language, I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. And then the board can override that, and then CDC can override that. So
yeah.
And I just saw on chat, Tom put a comment in that says in the previous edition, there were a number of changes clarifying the difference between enclosures and barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just put that in the chat if you didn't see that.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. All right. We're ready to vote. Any other comments? Let's look at 586 then as well, since we're on the subject. So yeah, it looks like the same.
Yeah, same. It's just the heading for the section.
Right.
All right, so we're gonna vote on this one and 586 at the same time. Any nays? All right. Give me 1 second while I update our spreadsheet. All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
All right. Next one is This one we reviewed back in September, and it was sent back to the submitter. Terrence, you were the facilitator on this. Do you want to give us an update, and did we get anything back from the submitter?
From the submitter, I'm just reconnecting with everything. I apologize, but I will be able to reach back to the submitter once we get off this Zoom.
Okay. I don't have any notes on this spreadsheet. I can look back about why we sent it back to the submitter. Sarah, do you have any notes on this one?
I don't. I would
We
have to, I would have to dig back and look a little bit.
Yeah. We just got a chat message from Time Keckler that this one should be withdrawn in favor of revision.
Okay, this one should be withdrawn. All right. Thank you, Tom. All right. Next one is 57227. This was submitted by James. James, you'll have to recuse yourself on this one.
Do we still have a quorum without James?
Yes.
Believe so.
We did.
Yep.
Okay.
Is Corey on the call?
I think I have this one, right?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Grace, you do.
Thank you.
Apologize.
This one was a little bit difficult for me, so I had to go back and forth asking James what does that mean. Anyway, so the proposed change to the text 57227 filtration enhancing products is changed to current text that states products used to enhance filter performance shall be used according to manufacturer's recommendation to add the following: products used to enhance filter performance, such as e.g. clarifiers, flocculants, or products containing organic polyelectrolytes shall not be used in combination with coagulants, i.e. products containing polyaluminum chloride to enhance filter performance. And then there's a supporting documentation that the common blue pool clarifiers containing cationic polymers that accumulate in pools and interfere with pathogen removal and should only be used in one-off scenario in pools that do not already feed a coagulant. This change to the code avoids negative interactions of products that could impact public health by impairing the removal of pathogens like Cryptosporidium. So this is a summary of the discussion with James, is as follows. I actually had to put together a note. So, okay, to clear cloudy pools, clarifiers and flocculants are used. In the US pool industry, clarifiers and flocculants refer to products containing organic cationic polymers. They're positively charged ions that attract negatively charged debris particles to form larger particles to either filter out, or the heavier particles can sink to the floor and then you can vacuum it out. When the submitter is referring to coagulants, he's referring to aluminum-based products, while clarifier, flocculants, and products containing organic cationic polymers are used in US, coagulants are universally used in Europe. Submitter states that the pool should use coagulants which are inorganics. Coagulants are sparingly soluble and bind to pathogens, such particles, and precipitates out. Most importantly, coagulants do not accumulate in the pool. While clarifiers and coagulants that contain organic cationic polymers tend to accumulate in the pool, polymers can continue to be soluble even at 50,000 parts per million, which explains how it can be accumulated in the pool. Submitter refers to, and this is important, that it's referring to Liu's study. It's a dissertation which shows initially organic cationic polymers seems to show positive effects of filtering, but within 48 hours of feeding clarifier at a recommended dosage, filter performance was bad, even worse than if no polymers were used at all. So Liu's study used filter performance products are in Liu's studies, the products used for the testing are commonly used in US. So then I had this question. If the problem of using cationic polymers were related to accumulation, how can we prevent overdosing? And James said that it's difficult to prevent polymers from overdosing. It would need a specialized equipment. So this is the basis for the change request. While coagulants would have worked fine by itself, when polymers are used in conjunction with coagulants, such as polyaluminum chloride, coagulants may not work due to the interference from the overdosed polymers. Therefore, this proposed change request says if common pool clarifiers are used, it should only be used if coagulant is not already being used or on a rare occasion for a short period of time. Such referring to Liu's study, this would be less than 48 hours. The purpose of this change request is to avoid negative interactions of products that could impact public health by impairing the removal of pathogens like crypto. This proposal seems to be based on Liu's study, and I'm thinking, should this report be submitted along with the change request to CDC to better understand the data behind it? That was the note I put in together, if that made sense at all.
I did my best to follow that.
Right, I did too, and what I was thinking is if we make this change, we would need an extensive explanation in the appendix.
Yes.
Thinking like a regulator and an operator. No, and what I'm hearing and reading here is that we have to consider more than the manufacturer's dosage instructions.
Are we only worried about coagulants that contain polyaluminum chloride, or is it all?
That's what I was going to ask. Are there coagulants that are used in the pool industry that do not contain polyaluminum chloride?
Because as it's written here, it can't be used in combination with all and any coagulants. The example that's given happens to have polyaluminum chloride. Are there other types of coagulants out there that don't have polyaluminum chloride? Are we worried about all of them or just these kind?
I mean, I think overall he would the best solution that would be recommendation is don't use this polymers positive charge and just use coagulants, which is aluminum chloride, aluminum based, because they are inorganic and they do not accumulate in the pool. But then it's the wordings are kind of confusing to me in this wording because he's kind of adding this thing to the existing text. But I guess because in US we use polymers.
Yeah, and I think there are some other coagulants like Ketosan is fairly common as well. But to me, this almost speaks to two issues: the overuse of the blue polymer clarifiers that I'm sure we've all probably witnessed that a time or two. And then additionally, the interference with a pool that has a coagulant feed. But of course, the manufacturers, I don't know that they're incentivized to necessarily disclose that.
Yeah, when I listened to that, I kind of got the impression it was use one or the other, but don't use them both together.
Me too. That's what I got.
And then if you follow the, and sorry, I'm not as smart as James. I'm a lifeguard, so I the best I can, but that seemed like how I interpreted that. And then if you do use them both, then you have to be concerned about that. But I think the way it's written, it kind of says, let's use one or the other, not both, so they don't interfere with each other.
Yeah. Can we have James add a little bit of color here?
Is that, I think that's a good point, Joseph, or, yeah, James, would that be accurate if it simply said, coagulants and what do we say, polymer? No, I can't even remember the terms. Coagulants and is it flocculants?
Yeah, clarifiers, flocculants, and products containing organic polyelectrolytes. Don't use in combination with coagulant.
But what if we just took out everything that's in parentheses and just say products used to enhance filter performance shall not be used in combination with coagulants?
Is that specific enough? I don't.
I was going to say, is that too broad sweep?
The problem here is that people don't understand the difference.
Yep.
Everybody thinks everything that is a coagulant is a clarifier and a flocculant, and those terms are used interchangeably. And in the US, we don't use any coagulants. It's only in Europe that we're using coagulants in pools. So when you're using the chitosan, it's an organic polyelectrolyte. You know, is it a clarifier or is it a flocculant? I don't know what it is, but it accumulates and it interferes and it's not good. And that's what this is trying to avoid, is if we can get people to use coagulants, we need to be damn sure they're not using all these other things that'll make them not work.
Here's my next question. How much of an issue is this?
Well, it's a non-issue right now because we don't use any coagulants in this country. But if we're going to start, which is my hope, we need to not use them in combination with the things that don't work, because they won't work with these things.
Maybe this one could be shelved for when we actually do use coagulants in this country.
Well, there's multiple CRs to use coagulants. I don't know that they'll be approved, but I've damn sure submitted them.
Are there
Would it,
products
sorry,
available? Sorry, go ahead, Cherry.
would it be okay to have your wording, just remove the clarifying statements in the parentheses and as a starting point?
Yeah, if you think people can figure out what they are, I mean,
We can add some of that to the annex there.
James, isn't aluminum sulfate a coagulant?
yeah, aluminum sulfate is a coagulant, and it would be inorganic, and it would fit in this coagulant family. But I haven't submitted any change request to use it because it's not as good. You'd have to use a lot higher dose.
Right, but it is currently used in the pool industry in the US, correct?
You know, again, there's probably some people that apply it by hand or something, you know, so I can't say that there isn't, but I don't think it's in widespread use, and it's not going to remove crypto. I mean, I'm talking about a continuous feed of a coagulant.
Okay.
You know, if you're going to make a sand filter work, you have to continuously feed an inorganic aluminum-based product, and polyaluminum chloride is used almost universally in Europe. Even though they have other things they can use, it's kind of the gold standard. But yeah, if you're just applying this stuff by hand, by broadcasting it or whatever, you know, I wouldn't even call that feeding a coagulant. Maybe we should put continuous feed of a coagulant or something here.
I think you're onto something. That might help simplify what you're getting at.
Does I think by on the coagulant manufacturer recommendations, do they talk about not using any of these other chemicals with coagulants?
No.
Quick question, James. Is your concern more pertaining to the actual feeding system as opposed to the actual coagulant itself?
Not no, the polymer doesn't interfere with the feeding system itself. It's just a matter, if you're gonna make a sand filter work, you have to continuously feed a coagulant. I mean, it's the only way. It's the way water treatment does it. It's the way the pools in Europe do it, and it's just the only way it'll work. But if you're doing that and you add these other products, you can make it not work. And that's all I'm trying to avoid, is somebody thinking their filter's working because they're adding a coagulant, and then they've made it not work by adding something else. And the labels don't warn people. So I was trying to do it right here.
That's been demonstrated to be problematic in pool settings in Europe.
In
Is
Europe,
this-
they don't use these in Europe. They don't use the cationic polymers or the clarifiers, the things that we call coagulants and clarifiers and stuff. They don't use at all over there. But my research has shown that if you try to make these things work, they only work for about, less than 24 hours, and then they stop working. I mean, you can feed them continuously, but they will only work for the first 24 hours, and then they never work again. And so this isn't the product that we need to feed continuously. I mean, it isn't the product that we need in the pool at all. But I didn't want to submit something that said we should ban clarifiers, flocculants, and organic polyelectrolytes. I was just trying to say, if you use this stuff, don't use it with a coagulant. Or if you use a coagulant, don't use this stuff with it.
Here's my another question. So like clarifiers are typically broadcasted and used like as needed. And we talk a lot about in training that if you're using a clarifier, that's not something you use all the time, and that you've got other issues going on that you need to solve. So are there any products that are that would be like a continuous feed of like a clarifier or flocculant or some kind of polyelectrolyte? Are there any products that are a polyelectrolyte that are in a continuous feed that would meet that 48-hour window that you're talking about, James?
I mean, you could feed these clarifiers, flocculants, and things any way you want to. I mean, you could feed them with a pump, or you could pour them out of the bottle. I mean, it just says 1 ounce per 5,000 gallons on the container. It doesn't say how to feed it. So, I mean, somebody could feed it with a pump. Somebody else could dose it, one time. It doesn't really say.
Yeah, I'm not saying it never happens. I'm just saying I've never seen anyone feeding it, and so.
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of that. But I'm sure we've never operated the same pool. So yeah, I'm not surprised you haven't seen it.
I think this would need to be, if this is going to be considered, it would have to be very simple, the way it's messaged and what the expectation is, and then the explanation of all that. That's what the annex is for. I worry most about any confusion that this may cause people, particularly if we're looking at very specific kinds of products not to mix together.
Yeah, at this point, because from my
I mean,
understanding,
do people understand what the difference between a flocculant and a coagulant? Or are they going to be in the lookout for it?
I don't think so.
And are they already mixing them out there?
I think that's what James just said, that currently we don't use coagulants, so not really, no. Which is where I think I would probably recommend waiting to do something like this until we have, one, a little bit better language, and two, it is something that is happening in the US.
Why don't we use coagulants here? Are they not available? Are they not allowed to be used?
That's a good question, James. You said you had other CRs about coagulants. Are they
prohibited?
Yeah, are they prohibited right now?
No, there's no prohibition or anything. It's just that the way that we've done, we used to use these in the United States, you know, between 1920 and 1950 or something like that. You know, we used to coagulate every sand filter, and we used to operate sand filters slow enough that they would work. But when you go to 15 gallons a minute per square foot, coagulants won't work at 15. So you have to go down to 12. And so, you know, there's a combination of things that would make coagulants work. And that's kind of what the change requests are trying to do, is to kind of get rid of the things that are preventing them from working, because you can't say sand filters work with a coagulant. You have to say, well, they only work with a coagulant under 12 gallons a minute per square foot. So it takes, you know, more than one thing to make these work. But no, there's no prohibition.
So
I get the intent. For me at this point, I think it's this CR would be too confusing for any reader to really understand, and I don't think it's necessary if it's not really happening right now. Plus, right now it's already talking about utilizing it according to manufacturer recommendations. At this point, I'd probably put it on the manufacturer that if you're not supposed to use it with other common pool chemicals, you should have it on that bottle.
That sounds reasonable.
That's my opinion. I don't want to speak for anybody. So Phil. But we do need to go ahead and vote because we've got more that we need to get through. Any other comments? Okay. We're gonna have to go through one by one, I think, on this one. Let's go ahead with yays. So those in favor.
I'll say yay.
Okay.
Yay.
2.
Is this as written?
As written. All right, we have 2 yays. Nays.
nay.
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 James, I think you're just ahead of your time.
I think so too.
Agreed. The world's not ready for James Amerke.
Oh,
I face this problem every day.
I'm gonna make a note that Joe and Terry were in favor. So whoever, so Grace, when you do that report, you're welcome to add that in. All right. On to the next one. James, you got to give us like a heads up, man, on these, because like this takes way too much brain power. You have to submit these with like coffee.
Yeah, Heather and I are going to team up for snickerdoodles next round.
There you go.
Wait a minute, I didn't sign up for that.
Next one. Hey, Corey. Next one is 572331. And the facilitator is Corey. Corey, do you want to give us a rundown?
If I can find my mute button, yeah. The proposed change to this text, it looks like has to deal with pretty much the same thing. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, James, or the same concept, but it has to do with the pre-coding of the filters, I believe. And you are asking that the struck out text be removed. And my understanding, we can read the supportive documentation, the supporting documentation. Your print needs to be just a hair bigger. There's a mistake in this. So the significant negative impact on public health, no pre-coat filters, regardless of the designer certification, should have the flow interrupted when switching from pre-coat mode to filter mode. When the flow is interrupted, the media will fall off of the pre-coated surface and will not recoat those areas evenly. So this makes no sense, is what we're saying, or what the request is for. So the request is to remove that language struck out. Good.
Okay.
Are there any filters that are certified to for flow through the filter to be interrupted? I agree with the with what James is saying here. If you interrupt the flow, it's similar to bumping the filter, and the media is going to fall off. I believe we're talking about regenerative media filters here, correct?
Or let's apply to DE filters.
Yeah, it would.
I actually like it. If there is something that's certified NSF ANSI 50, then they can ask for a variance for that, saying, hey, this is certified. But for the most part, I don't know that there is one, or like you said, Kent, if this is interrupted, the pre-coat mode is interrupted, you're going to lose filtration, and that's not what we want to do. So If they can prove that there's an NSF ANSI 50 standard that says you can interrupt that, then come to me and prove it before I'll allow you to do it. And they can have a variance for that. If not, don't interrupt the pre-coat mode.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have any TSC evaluations back on this. I think it did get sent, but just may not have one back yet. Any other comments? All right. We'll go ahead and vote. Any nays? All right. James, you won one.
I just wish I sold filters or something, you know. I don't feel like I want anything.
All right. Next one is 573132. This one, Levi, are you on? Yep. Levi, you're the facilitator on this. You want to give us a
I think this one's been argued many times over the years. Basically cyanuric concentration with your chlorine concentration. I mean, it limits it pretty, they're basically wanting to limit it pretty low to 25 parts per million versus the 90, which I think as a regulator is very restrictive for facilities. I would have to close down pretty much every pool in New Mexico if the limit was 25, unless they were hand dosing it, and even hand dosing it, they always seem to overshoot it. And so, but that's basically all it's asking. They provide a whole bunch of documentation. A lot of these studies are pretty old. A lot of the cited works are pretty old, from the 70s all the way up into the 2000s. Like I said, I think this is one that's come through several times. We all know that cyanuric affects the efficacy of the chlorine, but getting it to where it can work in a code and everything else, I don't feel like the 25. I feel like it's too restrictive.
Yeah, I kind of agree, because we all know, why CYA is used, and it has its pros and its cons, but one of the properties of CYA is it does accumulate. It doesn't get used up, and that's why it tends to, get higher. My biggest concern is the cost involved to operators to get it back down. If it is above 25, or it is getting close to 90 or 100, there's only really one way to do that, and that's with dilution. And the cost, particularly having to replace the water, water is a precious commodity. And as we move forward over the next few decades, it will be even more of a precious commodity. And I could see a lot of backlash to this from the industry.
Yeah, like I said, especially in New Mexico, the desert Southwest, we've been in a drought for several decades at this point. So, yeah, to me, 25 is just far too restrictive, whether it's from the cost to the operator or the cost to the environment.
Yeah, and I would love it if we never used CYA. But
everybody's got that option, Joe.
Yeah, it does have its place. It is used throughout the industry, and boy, this would there'd be a lot of ripples through the industry, especially for operators and owners.
So I think what this one is really saying is that the monochloramines in the pool are a better disinfectant than the chlorine if you go above 25. And the way that James Ambergy would say that is, if you want the pool to be safer, you got to pee in it. Because I mean, monochloramines is the primary disinfectant. You know, I mean, yeah, Michael Phelps would probably like this statement, but I mean, that's what this change request is all about here, is saying that, you know, if you want the pool to be safer, you got to be sure enough people are peeing in it so that the monochloramines are the primary disinfectant. And you know, it's a sad situation when, you know, we say it's okay to make the chlorine not work so you can buy less chlorine. You know, and so I mean, there's a number of these CYA change requests every cycle, and you know, I think that you know, people only have to replace water if they're using cyanuric acid. They don't have to. You got options.
I would have to agree with Levi from the regulatory side. We would be shutting down a lot of pools in North Carolina if it was down to 25. I think that's very low.
And I mean, even here in New Mexico, we have seen the switch ever since since we adopted the MAC and did away with the use of cyanuric acid in spas. So the facilities that do have the outdoor spas, they have got away from using the trichlor, the dichlors, and moved to using, you know, sodium hypochlorite, and then hand dosing. And they're realizing that, hey, yeah, if we keep this lower, it's a lot better. We're not having the added cost of having to drain the water. So I think industry is slowly going to catch up with this, and we may eventually get to a point where we can limit that to a much lower number. I just feel like it's still a little too early.
Yeah, this is a revolution, not an evolution example.
Well, I struggle with this one because it, you know, as James said, you know, you don't have to use cyanuric acid. You can use forms of chlorine that don't have cyanuric acid and avoid the whole problem. So, I mean, the argument that you know, it's too costly to drain water, you don't have to put yourself in that position to begin with. So I struggle with that a little bit, but I've also got, I guess, a dog in this fight as a distributor of chemicals. So I probably have to abstain anyway.
If you're not using, so a trichlor or dichlor, right? So you're using non-stabilized chlorine, not with cyanuric acid. Do you have to have a separate feeder, a different feeder? And maybe that's part of the cost too. Okay, we already have our pool. It has a specific feeder for stabilized chlorine. If we switch to an unstabilized chlorine, is that going to be a cost?
It's a nominal cost. It's not, they're not significantly expensive.
Thank you.
I think because we've already kind of gone down this road with the ad hoc committee, I would rather, unless there's some new issue that, you know, it hasn't been discussed before. These are all things that have been discussed before. So unless there's some new issue that has come out that we haven't looked at, I would I think rather stay with what we currently have that's been vetted through that ad hoc committee. We've discussed hours and hours over the last cycle, and you know, if we want to take it up again next cycle in a, you know, smaller committee, I think that's probably fine. But I think it would be, like Joe, I think you said, revolutionary to make that change.
Yeah, and Salinas, they've submitted the CR every edition of the MAC. And they have they would love this to pass because then people would have to buy more of their products. So they have a dog in the fight here. There's a reason they submitted this. It's presented from the perspective of public health and chlorine efficacy, but we've also received lots of CRs over the years for the opposite of this from companies that sell stabilized chlorine. So I always take these when they're submitted from companies or on behalf of companies that gained the change. I take those with a grain of salt, and I'd look at it strictly from the public health aspect.
Well, where do you look at it from the public health aspect, Joe? I mean, are you okay with monochloramine being the primary disinfectant in pools and encouraging people to pee in them?
Well, it's not always that simple. When we work with jurisdictions across the country that have different environmental factors, yeah, CYA is going to be used.
All right. Any other comments?
Quick
All right.
question.
Yes.
I distinctly remember that in 2019, there was a presentation at the World Aquatic Health Conference pertaining to cyanuric acid and its effectiveness over a certain percentage, depending upon the jurisdiction. And so from this conversation, it just reminds me of that literal issue and conversation. I forget the gentleman in the committee that actually presented this information, but it showed that after a certain measurement, it was not as effective. I do agree with Joe pertaining to this has been ongoing, but I also think that it's something that affects operators in the standpoint of how do you get this out of your pool, but it doesn't, it's collective in the pipes. So if you have a brand new aquatic director or pool operator, how do they know what to do by reading their jurisdictional health department guidelines, but then also the CMAHC guidelines to support? So I agree with that. It should stay as is, but I think there's some information that we can actually gather to help support our decision on this. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'll make one more comment here. I mean, clearly I'm in the minority, and I don't mind being there. But this company sells cyanuric acid and chlorine. I mean, it's not like they don't sell both products. So I just don't like the idea that the company's being biased. I mean, if the company sells both products, they don't really care which way it goes. I mean, or at least I don't think there's necessarily any bias. I mean, and I don't know, Kevin, do you sell both products or do you just sell one or the other?
Well, we sell a multitude of products, but we sell primarily non-stabilized chlorine for the most part, and that's what we recommend to our customers.
Okay.
Yeah, you can buy the chlorine and the cyanuric acid independent of each other, or you can buy it pre-bound.
Yep.
Okay.
I actually like the sliding scale model we had in the last go around, but that was a little complicated for everybody to figure out.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I was just looking through, yeah. I mean, we still have the imminent health hazard, language in place, and yeah. All right. Any other comments? All right. I think we're gonna have to go one by one again for this one. So, any yays?
Yeah, I would support it.
Okay. Any other yays?
I abstain on this one.
All right, Kevin's gonna abstain. And James. Yays. All right. I'll make that note. This one is not supported. Levi, you get the next couple of them. Move on
Yes,
to 573133. Another CYA.
So this one is just, yeah, this one's wanting to add a new section, or a new, whatever that piece is in the MAC, basically right under the same section we were just talking about, to basically say that if cyanuric acid of 300 parts per million, that it would require immediate remediation, which I apologize, I'm working off the first edition of the MAC. I think back then it was not a requirement as like an immediate closure if it exceeded the 100 parts per million. In my research on this one with the newest edition, it is an immediate closure item if it exceeds 90. So, I mean, this is just doubling down, but then you're three times the amount of what would be allowed for the facility to even be able to remain open.
Well, I got a correction there. The 90 parts per million for CYA in the third and fourth edition MAC, that's the operating upper limit. It's not an imminent health hazard, and it does not warrant immediate closure. That's just the upper limit that's listed for operating. So yeah.
Okay, the inspection form.
You don't have to.
I pulled up the inspection form. It calls it a critical violation. I assume that was an immediate health hazard. Like I said, I'm not as familiar with this newer version, but yeah. So that's where I'm at. It says item number 23 calls it a critical violation, cyanuric acid. The item 23 on the cheat sheet for the inspection form says closure, cyanuric acid, DPD free chlorine ratio exceeds 45:1. So, I mean, I guess 90 is technically not the upper limit, but your 45:1, I believe would still be less than 300. Is that correct?
Well, it depends what chlorine is.
You could have up to, I just did the math, it's like 6.66 repeating chlorine level and to hit 300.
So I guess what you're saying there at the 45:1, you could go, if you could go up to 10 parts per million, you could go up to 450 technically.
Technically.
And this would limit it to 300.
Yep.
Right, based on imminent health risk to humans based on that kind of exposure.
Okay. In that case, I mean, they submitted that toxicity limit PDF. And reading through it, I mean, it's pretty clear that 300 is kind of that. Reading through the annex, kind of talks about some other stuff. I forget exactly what it was, but you know, there's been plenty of measurements that, you know, it's based on whether you're in the pool every day versus, you know, occasional exposure throughout a year. I mean, yeah.
Quick question, Dewey, for you. Is this the PHTA RWAQC? Is that a subcommittee for us, or is that a PHTA committee that we
It's a PHTA committee.
Yeah, that's a PHTA committee.
Okay.
Yeah, and it should be noted that this one was presented last time and was, I believe it was passed by this committee and the voting membership at large. Then it ran into some roadblocks at CDC. So this is based on the same information, the same white paper from NSF. if you read that thing carefully, it's not simple, but all the information is there. It makes sense to me. I am in favor of setting some kind of upper limit based on human exposure, because folks may end up getting sick if they get exposed to it, particularly chronically. So this kind of puts a cherry on top of what is already the operating limit of 90. And then the 90 doesn't mean you need to shut it down. It's just, what's the operating range, 90 or less. And for the inspection form, that only makes reference to the ratio, which, would kind of imply a 2 ppm of chlorine, 45 to 1 would be 90. But if your chlorine's higher than that, then.
So I've got another question. Hang on one second. So, and this is purely bureaucratic. So if I tick anybody off, I apologize. But to do what they want to in this CR, it would need to be in the immediate closure section, not in the section that they reference here.
Probably in the 663, which is the immediate intimate health hazard. And Tom put a comment in the chat, which I think kind of sums it up very simply. 45 to 1 ratio is based on the loss of chlorine efficacy, and the 300 parts is based on toxicity.
Right.
But if you try to find human toxicity information, and I've talked to quite a few people about this for CYA, it's hard. And I think Jen Huang might be on the call here. She said it best to me. He's like, there aren't a lot of studies on CYA toxicity on people because, that'd be pretty unethical. So a lot of the information out there is based on animal studies. And that's what's listed there in the white paper.
Yeah, I was pretty sure there were 2 different studies on toxicity. I don't know which one this is, but and I'm not opposed to this or anything. I'm just saying I think there's at least 2 studies, even though only one cited. That always gives me pause when I only see 1 out of 2 cited. But anyway,
yeah, it's hard to find the human health impacts out there of upper levels of CYA. Not much is out there.
It's also interesting. We only require testing once a month, I believe.
yeah, it is.
Well, we only require it once a month after you've introduced it, but you have to test it 24 hours after introducing it. So if you had a chlorine feeder, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, if you had a chlorine feeder that utilized stabilized chlorine, then you would need to test CYA every day because you're introducing it every day. If you're hand feeding it, then you only have to test it the day, not only, but you would test it the day after. You're required to test it the day after, and then monthly from there on out.
Yeah, true.
And then if you're using stabilized chlorine, you have to test it weekly, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, is it weekly? Well, so that
So
might
it's-
be something we need to look at later, because if it's weekly, but then there's also another section that says if you.
Yeah, that's all in 5757. So sign your
Yeah, if
gas.
you introduce
Every testing
CYA,
month.
then you have to test it daily, or the next day after introducing it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I asked Jody too about this one, and I didn't want to. Well, I never want to, rock the boat too much, proposing, radical changes. And I said, "Is this 300 limit already in place somewhere out there?" She goes, "Oh yeah, it's in our stuff." So the PHTA, they already have it in their code. And one of the reasons they wanted to submit this was in the spirit of harmonization with some of the other guidelines that are already out there.
Okay. Well, any other comments? Because we do need to move on this one too. We've got some more to go through. Any additional comments? All right, let's go ahead and hold another vote. We're going to have to go through everybody again. All the yays?
Yay.
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 Any nays?
Nay.
Okay. Was that Levi? Is that you?
Yes.
Okay. All right, this one is supported. I'll make a note. Your vote, Levi. Next one is 573223, submitted by James. Levi, I think you're the facilitator on this one as well.
Yep. Basically wanting to change this one was kind of confusing to me, mainly because I'm not very good at the chemistry side. But basically talking about how bromate, has set limits in drinking water, and how the Model Aquatic Health Code does not address that. And basically wanting to add that it shall not be, ozone shouldn't be permitted with bromine or salt chlorine generators, because the salt can contain bromide, which can be converted to bromate, which is hazardous at a pretty low concentration, or based on what the EPA says. Like I said, this one was a tough one for me. If James has any comments, maybe he can clarify a little bit better as to why this one should be considered.
Yeah, just real quick, kind of in a nutshell, any drinking water plant that wants to use ozone has to make sure there's no bromide there to form bromate, which will rapidly exceed the EPA limit for disinfection byproducts. So this is not saying you can't use ozone. It's just saying if you use ozone, make sure you don't have bromide in the pool to form these DBPs. The MAC doesn't have any regulations on DBPs like they do in Europe or in drinking water. So this is just kind of protecting people from a kind of a ozone faux pas.
What was the? Can somebody explain the purpose of the does not modify any other water quality measure requirements? What was the original purpose of having that statement in this paragraph or in this sentence? Am I asking the question correctly?
I think it's a great question. I'm wondering the same thing myself. I can't figure out what that even means in the original.
Yeah, taking it out doesn't change the intent to me. Is that correct? I see Sarah, you're nodding.
Yeah,
Kevin, do you agree?
Yeah, it feels like the part that we're crossing out here, it almost seems like random words that were tacked on that don't really mean anything.
So
Miklos, can you pull up the
modification
original?
is the does not modify any other water quality requirements is what the MAC says now. It says free available chlorine and bromine levels. Use of ozone does not modify any other water quality requirements.
Right, but the question is that part that's
basically meaning that you have to maintain your
your other water quality. Yeah, I think what we're asking though is like taking out that sentence. I don't think to me, it doesn't change the intent of the original sentence in that section.
Well, but so the rest of that's submitted should have been underlined as new text, is what I'm saying. The rest of that's not in there.
Okay.
The statement only says the 5.7.3.2.2.3 says free available chlorine and bromine levels. Use of ozone does not modify any other quality requirements. That's all it says. So he's basically nixing everything that the MAC says, and that is what he's wanting to replace it with.
I see.
Oh.
That's a horse of a different color.
Oh.
So I mean, there might be some science behind not using ozone with bromine disinfectants or salt and chlorine generators. The other piece, I just don't feel like it goes in this section. It still should have that piece of does not modify any other water quality requirements, because we need that in there to say, hey, just because you're using ozone doesn't mean that you can reduce your chlorine. The modification to this one might have been, nix the and bromine levels under the ozone and then create another section that would have, specifically said what he's wanting to add, which is that it shall not be permitted with bromine disinfectants and salt chloride generators that use salt containing detectable levels of bromide. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's another question is, does this happen? Because does it ever happen where
Sure. I was able to find one report on bromates from the EPA. Be honest with you, the paper's way above my level in chemistry. And yeah, basically what I was able to find was that I think depending on how much bromide or whatever can be converted, it can still stay under that 10 parts per billion. Like I said, it's a little above my head on the chemistry side. So maybe James can chime in a little bit.
Are people using ozonated and bromated pool water as their source of drinking water?
I would hope not.
Yeah, me too. We actually encourage people not to drink pool water, and I don't think it's a fair comparison to look at pool water and drinking water in the same perspective, because we put signage out there: don't drink or swallow the pool water. Once a person gets in it, it's no longer potable, even if your source is coming in. And this, like we already say, it doesn't take away any of the other parameters that are required, including an upper limit for bromine, if that's being used.
So the the annex does state that the excuse me, the MAC has opted not to include lists of disinfectants that should not be used versus discussing that these chemicals must not pose a hazardous issue with chlorine or bromine disinfectants. I don't know if that's kind of where this is going.
I think I would hesitate to add this for a couple of reasons. One, not sure that this is the correct section for it. Two, is it an issue that needs to be solved at the moment? And then three, does it fly in the face of what Joe just read?
Yeah, we're talking about removing these 8 words.
Well, it's but what we found is that so this sentence is not currently in this section.
Oh, I see. So that's the part that needs to be underlined.
Correct. This should be underlined. Yep.
I mean, if we want to keep it simple and look at it from as it's submitted, is it going to work even under that section? I say no.
And I would agree. Yeah. Any other comments? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Any yays? All right, no yays. This one's not supported. We'll move on to the next one. Kevin, you're up. This is.
Yeah, this is 57332.1. And this one essentially is just removing the EPA pesticide registration requirement from specific products, clarifiers, flocculants, and defoamers that can't possibly be registered as pesticides under EPA. I believe that the TSC was in favor of this, but I don't think they ever submitted it to the website. But to me, this one is really straightforward since there's absolutely no way these products could be registered as pesticides. There's no reason to have this as an and or an or, since neither one is possible. So I think we should vote yes on this one.
Any other comments? Joe Lako, you took your stuff off mute. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just getting ready to say yay.
Oh, okay. All right, well, no other comments, so we'll make this easy. Any nays?
And here's my yay.
All right, this one's supported. Thank you, Kevin. Levi, you're up. This is, oh, shoot. Hang on.
Nicholas, you have a timer that I could see counting down. It's 7.5 minutes. Is your laptop going to self-destruct?
No, this is so we keep on track. We don't spend too much time. Yep.
Yeah, so this one's basically trying to add some language to the monitoring frequency for ozone system. I apologize, my computer, I'm trying to get to that little table that's in the new Mac here, and my computer is not wanting to cooperate. So I had some notes here. So in the table 5.7.3.7.7, currently it says the ORP should be monitored continuously, recording frequency every 4 hours. I feel like it's just some inconsistency with maybe verbiage. Operational indicators in range is continuous and every 4 hours. What James submitted was ozone residual being monitored every 4 hours and recording frequency every 4 hours. After going back and reading 5.73.7.7, right above that, or even, I forget the other section, where it talks about, I guess, 4.73342, measure the concentration. I feel like what was intended was operational indicators in range is what James is asking for, is the ozone residual. But I think it's just a matter of verbiage used. So he's basically saying that in 4.73342, on-site measurement ozone system shall be designed to measure the concentrate of ozone to a minimum of 2 sampling locations to determine the CT and activation value achieved in the treatment system. Prior to that, recirculation treatment loop. A CT and activation value of 4.9 ppm minimum is required for 2 log cryptosporidium reduction at a water temperature of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Like you said, I believe the intent under the table was operational indicators in range would mean that it's operating and producing the 4.9 ppm as it's going. And it's basically what James, I think, is trying to say is that, hey, it's not saying that you need to measure the residual of the ozone. Why don't we add ozone residual? I feel like operational indicators in range, continuous monitoring, and recording every 4 hours does the same thing as his change of ozone residual every 4 hours and every 4 hours.
Yeah, the chart currently says
It's
annually.
actually less.
I think, James, are you asking for something different than what's currently in the chart?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what operational indicators in range means, but as far as I know, no manufacturer is designing these things based on CT values, or that they're measuring the residual. So if I can make this really simple, if I have a machine that produces 2 parts per million of ozone, or 2 parts per million of chlorine, what is the residual in the water? Well, it's the part that doesn't get used up. So you actually have to measure the residual if you want to know what it is. You can't just say, well, I put in 2 parts per million of bleach, therefore there's 2 in the pool. I mean, if there's a bunch of people in the pool, it won't be 2. And the same goes for ozone. I mean, you can't just say, well, the machine's making 2, so the residual's 2. I mean, you got to measure it. I mean, it's not a big complication, but I just don't know what the operational indicators would be, but I'm sure they're not residuals because no machine can measure the residuals.
Well, whether they're measuring it or not, it has to be designed to have 2 sampling locations to determine the CT value.
So it has two locations, but there's no requirement to measure it either at any time. I mean, that's what I'm reading.
No, it has to have two sampling locations to determine the CT inactivation value achieved in the treatment system prior returning the water to the aquatic venue.
So that's the design requirement. And in the operational requirement, there's no requirement that the ozone residual ever be measured. You know, that's what the change request is for, is to actually say that you need to measure these every 4 hours versus never.
So there in section 4 shall be designed to measure the concentration of ozone. And I think what James is saying is chapter 5 says you actually have to do that and capture it.
Well, I think that's what this one is, control system indicating ozone being created.
No,
well,
the creation and the residual different.
Yeah, we have to get the residual to know what the concentration is.
Okay.
So James, if I'm not mistaken here, you just want to add an extra row in this table.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm confused with the term ozone residual to begin with, and what method of testing we'd be using for that.
Right. And
I mean, we're typically not talking about an ozone residual in a pool.
I think what James is saying, it's not on us, it's on the manufacturer. So the manufacturer is already required to have two sampling locations. So James, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that they already have two sampling locations. So all we're saying is that it's designed to have two sampling locations, but currently as written, you don't have to continuously monitor those two sampling locations to make sure you're reaching that CT value. Whereas with like UV, we are constantly monitoring to ensure it's dosing appropriately.
So this is in the treatment loop then?
Correct.
right, we don't want ozone in the pool.
Yeah, it's not something that the operator would have to monitor. It's just something that the system would have to be able to monitor.
Yeah, the term residual threw me off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right now in chapter 5, we have a residual ozone concentration max of 0.1 part per million.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
so I guess being able to capture that and measure it and document that.
yeah,
would
and
be a good thing.
it would just need to be a readout, yeah, that the operator can document every 4 hours.
And what is the testing method here that we're using? Or that
We're not using one. The manufacturer has to use it. The
Right,
manufacturer has to do it.
So whatever they want to choose to represent the ozone in the side stream at two different points, that's what's being utilized and logged. We're not specifying the method or anything else.
Correct. They already have to do it because it's already got to be designed to do it.
Yeah.
So all we're saying is that we're designing it. You have to design it to do it. So tell us what those numbers are so we can make sure that it's continuously working as designed.
But as I read the current requirement, we have to have sample ports to be able to measure it, and we're talking about being able to continuously monitor it. And does that technology exist?
Well,
and what's the cost of it?
This is what is currently in the MAC, so
Right.
they have to have it anyways.
Right. But what I see there is that we have to have 2 sampling locations that you can open up and take a sample from.
I see what you're saying. So it's not saying that they actually have to sample it. It's that saying that we have to be able to sample it.
Right. Right. And what I see this language asking for is continuous monitoring.
And I think the continuous monitoring, and kind of what I was trying to get at is I think that the continuous monitoring is already addressed through the use of ORP, isn't it? Just above the added line, and then what's added is something called ozone residual. And I'm trying to understand what, because I think the manufacturers are using ORP for this purpose, are they not?
So how would you, okay, so yeah, if you were going to take those sampling locations, you're going to measure an ozone residual. Now I'm understanding. How are you measuring that residual? And Kent, what you're saying is the testing equipment even available to do that?
Correct.
There's already a requirement that we keep it below 0.1.
That's in
So
the
there's
pool.
a possibility we have that residual upper limit in the MAC, and there's no way to measure that or ensure that.
Oh.
James, are there tools and equipment that can be used, handhelds, to measure ozone residual concentration?
Yeah, they have tools to measure that. I'm sure they're not required in the MAC, but yeah, they.
No, it just says we just have the concentration max.
Yeah, that's the airborne concentration above the pool. So that there is an airborne concentration meter. They just call them sniffers, and you could go out there with a sniffer, but I don't think those are required in the MAC. But I mean,
Well,
it
in the
is
MAC, it
possible.
says residual ozone concentration in the water shall remain below 0.1 parts per million in the aquatic venue water.
Yeah, that's in the pool, but the disinfection is taking place in an ozone contactor. So the ozone system is like in the filter room, and there's a volume of water that has ozone in it, and that concentration might be 2 or 3 milligrams per liter, and it might stay that way for like 2 minutes to get a CT of like 6. And then after that, there can't be any ozone going back to the pool.
The way I understand is ozone dissipates very quickly. The MAC doesn't say to test the water for a 0.1. It says test the airspace within 6 inches of the aquatic venue water shall be tested to determine compliance of less than 0.1 in the gaseous zone. So, I mean, like I said, I'm sticking with, I feel like the operational indicators in range is the same thing as maybe the ozone residual, saying that the machine is doing its job, it's operating within the range to meet the secondary disinfection requirement. I feel like that's what the operational indicators in range. It might be a verbiage change in the future, but as written, I don't feel like this one addresses the problem exactly as it needs to be.
So I think this one, to me, mirrors the UV system validation.
Yep.
CR. So that we talked about making sure that the transmissivity in the UV system allows for the 3 log reduction that the UV system is supposed to be designed for. And we decided to not support that one. So I think to stay along the same lines, that's probably going to be my position.
I mean, I don't understand how you
point.
can use an old CR on a different topic to not support this one. I mean,
it's essentially the same thing. You're asking for equipment that's already been designed to provide a certain CT value, and you're asking for enhanced monitoring. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying
So
I don't
Miklos,
know if it's
let me
feasible.
ask you a question here.
I'm asking, is it feasible?
Yeah, it's feasible, but let me ask you a question.
But you haven't provided any documentation showing that it's feasible.
You can vote against it. I don't have
I know.
a problem with it. I'm just trying to ask a question.
Sure.
And the question is, if we dose chlorine for a swimming pool based on how much we're generating in a salt chlorine generator, or how much what percentage of bleach that we have, and what the flow rate of the pump is, that sort of thing. I mean, you can dose 2 milligrams per liter in the pool.
Mhm.
But what's the residual going to be? And the answer is you simply can't know unless you measure it. And if you're going to claim 2-log or 3-log crypto based on a secondary disinfection system that doesn't measure residual, I mean, there may be 0 ozone residual. I mean, the system may not even be working, and there would be no measurement of it. And that's my complaint here, is that, there's no way to know if you're getting that CT value except to measure the concentration and the time. I mean, you can just hope that it works. You can think that it works, but if you don't measure it, you certainly don't know. I mean, it's just like saying, well, I'm going to put 2 milligrams per liter of bleach in the pool and the residual is going to be 2. No,
Right.
it won't be.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
When we're measuring ORP, isn't that an indicator that things are working right?
Question. Even with measuring the ORP, is measuring the disinfectant that is leaving residual in the water. With ozone dissipating very quickly, you would need to be a different tester or alarm to do so. Most pool operator trading is stating that ozone is the secondary disinfectant, but it's not leaving residual, so it needs the primary disinfectant, bromine or chlorine, to be left in the pool. So the measurement for the ORP is the disinfectant, not the ozone disinfectant, ozone left in the water itself. No?
Well, this is all referring to within a side stream before it returns to the pool.
We do need a vote on this. So any other comments? Okay. We'll go ahead and vote. Any yays? Okay.
I'm going to abstain. I think I would need to go back and look at some of the other entries to see if any of this.
Okay.
Sense with the dissipation rate and locations of those ports and everything else.
I will mark that down. No problem.
I think I would abstain too, because I don't know enough information about the ports and those things. Do you still have a quorum if 2 of us abstain?
That's what I'm counting right now. I think we do.
I have to abstain too. I mean, you know that, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 9, correct? Do we?
8. Need 8.
8. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So this one is going to be not supported. I'm going to mark that Joe, Sarah, and sorry, Joe and Sarah abstained.
And James.
And James.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is excuse me.
I think it's 573.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. So this one is somewhat similar to the one that we discussed earlier, except we had some significant discussions about this one back in September, and had asked James to resubmit this with some modified language that kind of simplified this, and he has done that. And the modified language now removes the or from the and or and adds disinfectants shall. And so basically what this winds up doing is it says that treatment chemicals shall be certified listed to NSF, ANSI, or any ANSI accredited certification organization, and disinfectants shall have an EPA FIFA registration and be used only in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So it's basically saying that any water treatment chemical has to have the NSF certification, and disinfectants additionally shall have the EPA pesticide, which makes perfect sense. And it's, I believe, what we had agreed to for the resubmittal. So this one, I believe, should also be a yes vote.
Okay.
Yeah, this one looks good.
Agree.
Any other comments? All right. Any nays? All right. That one is supported. Let's try to get through a couple more before quitting time here. We closed this one already. Inserting a new section to 591. The facilitator is Levi.
Can you scroll up a little more too? There, other up.
So we've gone over this one before. Miklos, this was the one that we had put it back on Tom to, I think, I've got like three that are the exact same. There's this one, another one, and then the previous one. So
I see.
I think this one, I think it finally got kind of the holding place, and he added some language. The equipment room shall be maintained and operated so that the equipment room continues to meet all of its original design and construction requirements. And then that pushes the chemical storage down to 5.92, and then chemical handling down to 5.93. It's not really changing any text other than adding the 591.
Mm-hmm.
That way it separates out the equipment room from the chemical storage to make it clear that chemical storage should not happen in the equipment room.
I see. And I remember this one now. Then this was one that I think we had looked at, and we pulled, was potentially going to be in summary one, but we ended up pulling. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or no, this is the one that got
We basically went back to him
This
and
one
asked.
got sent back. Yeah.
That's the one that got sent back.
Yeah.
As submitted, I'm fine with the 591-0001. With the additional text under 5.9.1 and then the change in the numbering structure for the chemical storage and the chemical handling. It makes it line up with chapter 4 better.
That's what I was just going to check.
Yeah.
So does it line up with chapter 4 now?
Yes, it should. I would check, but my computer's completely froze other than this meeting apparently.
So this one, I think we had sent this one back because 5.9 doesn't, this does not match 4.9. 4.9 is filter and equipment room.
Yeah, that's the original submission, right? Not the updated one, right?
No, they're two different ones. So this is 59001. And this is,
Yes, this is the one you're on.
This is the
Closest.
original. Sorry, go ahead.
So that one, the 591, that's the new updated.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, so this one is withdrawn then.
I believe so.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so great. So let's do this one then first. I think it makes more sense to do this one first. All right. So all in favor or any nays to the updated language here? All right. And then with this language in mind, then we have a new section 591, these two move down to 592, and language about the equipment room. Any comments on this one? Or additional comments? All right. Any nays? All right. Right. We have 3 left that were on the docket for today. Can everyone hang on for a few more minutes?
There were a couple of people that dropped off. So Joe, Lako, and
Okay.
parents had to drop off. Do we still have a quorum with the rest of us?
Yes, we do.
So I think we're good to continue on through the last 3.
Okay. All right, 633. Thank you everybody for being flexible. 633, reevaluate rotation procedures to include acceptance of single guard facilities. This could take up all of our time. And I think I gave this one to you, Joe.
You did.
Yep.
So the the gist of the change request is around the alternation of task every 60 minutes and the ability for single guard facilities to be able to manage that. So when I when I look at the change request, a couple of things come to mind. The change request is as part of the rationale stated that the facility would have to go unguarded. I do not believe that's accurate. I think they have the opportunity to close for that 10-minute window every hour, which is the way most of the facilities now are doing that operationally. 63313 does allow for a break to count here. So a lot of folks are using that as some break time, that 50 minutes or that 10 minutes of each hour there. Even though it does require some closure and it's an operational consideration, they do have the ability to go and do that as long as they provide for somebody to monitor the pool and make sure that nobody's in it once they clear it and that person goes down on break. That's a requirement anyways of 63431, where zones that are not open for use should be staffed or enclosed with a barrier. So they have the ability to make that closure every 10 minutes. This did go to the TSC. They listed it as not technically defensible. And the lifeguard and bather supervision ad hoc committee will also have an upcoming CR that will address this in a different manner. So that change request, if it's adopted, will eliminate single guard facilities, which is a whole nother issue. The real concern here is that this alternation of task was added because of the impact that it has on the lifeguard's ability to remain vigilant for a long period of time when we have repetitive behaviors such as scanning a swimming pool or a particular zone of protection. I think this change goes against that best practice based and that research that's been done on vigilance with redundant tasks. The TSC provided a no recommendation, and the lifeguard and bather supervision ad hoc committee is going to address that in a separate way, which also would render this point moot. There were no member comments that were provided, and in my opinion, this should be a nay recommendation on this, just as a result of, they do have the ability to actually meet the standard that we put in place. And I think it's a step backwards and goes against the current best practices and the research that's been done on vigilance and redundant tasks.
Great synopsis. I agree. To meet the requirements, close the pool. Any other comments? All right. Any yays for this change request? All right. This one is closed, not supported. Thank you, Joe. Next one is submitted by Dewey. So let's rip them up, Heather.
Okay. This one should kind of be a little straightforward. He's wanting to add language regarding the AEDs. And this is basically to harmonize the MAC with the ISPSC and PHTA. Just wanting some signage about AEDs and a mounting height of 7 feet. And the signs apparently are commonly available for purchase. And it's just wanting to basically harmonize all the 3 things together.
Okay. Any comments? All right. Any nays? Levi, was that okay? I think that was just noise. All right. This one is supported. Thank you, Heather. Sarah, Bring us home.
I'm actually prepared today, so I feel better about life. So this one is an exception for other methodologies to prevent entrapment when suitable float tank skimmers are not used. Right now, flotation tanks have to meet the VGBA compliance. So there's language saying that entrapment prevention, if the flotation tank skimmers and submerged section fittings or section outlets are used not in accordance with MAHC section 7.1.7.4, they should have another form to make sure that the patron is not at risk being in the flotation tank while the filtration tank is running. My thoughts on this one was flotation tanks are not recirculating when patrons are in there. Why are we saying that they don't meet the MAHC 7.1.7.4? If we say they have to meet it, they have to meet it. If not, they can't be open. So if flotation tanks are not recirculating when patrons are using them, why is there an entrapment risk? They need to meet the meet what we've already said they need to meet, is my thought. There were a couple of studies, these were in New Zealand, or a couple of articles that were attached to it, the links. There's no mention if there's VGBA compliance. The person that was in there, the filtration unit kicked on. They didn't hear the alarm that told them to get out. The filtration kicked on. They were in the unit backwards so that their hair got caught in the filtration. Like I said, if we have these flotation tanks, they should meet the VGBA, period. That's my thought.
Okay. Any other comments?
There was no TSC comments on that yet either.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. So basically what we're saying is that, well, what you're saying, Sarah, is that if a float tank is going to be recirculating, it needs to comply with the laws that are on the books right now.
Correct.
And in most cases, flotation tanks are not recirculating, so it doesn't matter.
Correct.
It's my understanding that is my understanding of it too.
So I would not support this one.
All right.
I would agree with Sarah on the regulatory side. We have specific float tank rules here in North Carolina, and they are not allowed to operate while the customer is actually in the tank floating. There's no recirculation or anything going on. So I'm with Sarah. I would have to vote no on this one, not support it.
Okay.
This is Grace from Fairfax County. We also don't run circulation when, patrons there. So I agree with Sarah.
Okay. Any others? All right. Any yays? We'll go ahead and vote. Any yays for this CR? All right. So this is not supported. Go ahead and make that note. And we got through all of them today. Great job, everybody. Awesome.
Yay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your efforts. I sent out an email with a voting link to add up to 3 more meetings to make sure we can get through all of the CRs that we need to. That includes special meetings for the Lagoon edition. That's going to take a while to go over. So Please vote as soon as we have a couple of dates and times for a quorum. We will get those meetings scheduled. Okay.
If future meetings are going to run over, Miklos, I'm going to expect snickerdoodles, and I think Sarah is too.
I'll mail them to you. I'll make some and mail them to everybody. They may not be fresh though. And my kitchen is not inspected, just FYI.
I would agree with that statement, James. Yep.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving then.
Yeah, I could use a snickerdoodle right now. All
Some
right,
of the barbecue joints down here, Sarah, that wouldn't matter.
Sounds good.
We had one that had nationally recognized in magazines barbecue shut down the local health department because it was hauling raw meat and cooked meat in the same wheelbarrow.
Wait.
And you heard that right, wheelbarrow.
It's amazing we don't die with all the violations that are out there. I'm just gonna say that. So my kitchen, knowing that I'm a health inspector, is pretty clean. So you all be safe if I send you snickerdoodles.
Dewey, please find us a picture of somebody carting around meat in a wheelbarrow.
Yes, please.
Unfortunately they've closed.
I'll send you a couple. I do it all the time.
But yeah.
I'm just a lifeguard. What do I know?
That's something out of a horror movie.
I do have a picture of them stirring a great big garbage pail of chili with a shovel. I actually have a picture of that.
So there is, yeah, I'm not going to say the name, but there's a rumor in high school that a fast food location did the same thing with some of their drinks, that they would mix it in a big garbage container.
With a shovel? Even better.
Oh, that's called whoop juice down here.
Oh, well,
yeah.
We have the galvanized trash cans. They're making slaw in for the barbecue, and they're mixing it with their bare arm, just completely stuck down in there. Yeah.
Now, it is possible that these wheelbarrow trash cans and shovels may be NSF listed. So hang on.
Oh, these were not. I don't think the guy's hairy arm at the barbecue restaurant is very NSF approved.
The food grade stainless steel wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
You never
we could write a book on the horror stories we have seen.
I would read that book.
I'm going to call it No Lie. That's the title.
Joe, we need to make a lifeguarding book. Same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks for the work, everybody.
See you soon.